Star Wars: The Old Republic is a free-to-play MMORPG set in the Star Wars universe and is run by EA and BioWare. This game released on December 20th, 2011 and still has maintained a solid player base to this day, albeit it isn't as popular as some of the other MMORPGs that are currently out there. But as part of my MMO tour that I'm doing, hitting all the major MMOs out there and doing a small video series on them, SWTOR was surprisingly one of the most heavily requested games out of all of them, so I decided to dive in on a Sith Inquisitor Assassin. But for those who do not know, Star Wars: The Old Republic is a very heavily story-driven MMORPG, with each class having their own unique storyline. On top of the story quests for your class, you also have planetary storylines, side quests, and then you also have the expansion storylines. Every interaction in SWTOR's questing is also totally voice acted, and you get the ability to respond as your character during these story quests. You can favor light side reactions, dark side reactions, or be a more gray character and just simply respond how you feel to what is appropriate in each situation. The game has a max level of 75, which will be changed to 80 with the new expansion coming out at the end of this year, and it is a theme park MMORPG. Although if you do want to go back and do old zone content, the game will scale your level down to that of the zone. The game also has, of course, two factions, the Republic and the Empire, with each faction having 4 classes specific to the faction. But since each class has 2 advanced classes or subclasses on top of that, you therefore have 8 advanced classes. Now, the classes on the factions do mirror each other. So for example, a Sith Inquisitor is going to be similar to a Jedi Counselor, but there will be some differences. These advanced classes or subclasses also have 3 specs, giving you a ton of different class options. The game also has all the traditional MMO systems that you'd want out of a game: central auction house, robust player housing and guild housing, dungeons, which are known as flashpoints, raids, which are known as operations, a wide variety of PvP modes, which do include ranked and unranked options, professions, which are known as crew skills, a robust companion system, mounts, banking, guilds, and more. The game also does have a microtransaction shop known as the Cartel Shop, but thankfully most stuff in the shop is totally cosmetic and just provides some experience boost. If you don't want to spend money in the microtransaction shop though, what's good is that most things can be purchased off the central auction house, which is known as the Galactic Trade Network, or credits, which is this game's in-game gold currency. The game also does have a new expansion coming out over the holiday season of this year called Legacy of the Sith, which will bring a host of new updates and content to the game, and this will be extended into 2022 as well to celebrate Star Wars: The Old Republic's 10-year anniversary. So guys, I want to break down the rest of this video into 3 major parts: the good, the gray, and the bad from my first impressions of Star Wars: The Old Republic. So starting with the good, the first thing, of course, that I have to talk about is the story and leveling process in the game. Star Wars is known for having a fantastic story, and that does hold true. If anybody's watched any of my content, you probably know, especially on Twitch, you know I'm not the biggest fan of questing. I don't really care about it all that much, and typically we'll just blast through it in my games to get to the end game and start doing PvP. But I have to say, the story in SWTOR has really drawn me in. They've done a very good job. I think being able to react as your character in each situation and make a choice that actually shapes the game, whether you want to make a dark side choice or a light side choice in any given situation, I think is amazing. And I also think it's really cool that they have such a strong leveling process, because it's the first time that a new player is going to interface with your game. And so by having a strong leveling process, you're going to make sure that that player is drawn into the game, has fun, and then actually makes it towards that end game. If your leveling process is kind of boring and just a means to an end, think about that. It's like your new player's first impression with the game. So I'm glad that the leveling process was given a lot of care in this game. There's also something in the game called the Adaptive Gear Vendor, which I think is really cool. If you guys want to know more about that, I talked about it in my top 10 tips video. But basically, you get gear in SWTOR that you call like the base gear pieces like a shell, and you basically will put these other items into it that give it their stats. They're called modifications or augmentations or whatever you want to call them. And what's really cool is that you could buy the shell gear from a certain vendor and then go to the augment vendors in your capital fleet basically every 4 to 5 levels and continually upgrade your gear as you quest, which I think is pretty cool. The companion system in the game is also fantastic. Companions have been in SWTOR, I believe, since the beginning, and they're really, really well done. You have a lot of different companion options. Companions have different stories. You can have certain relationships with the companions. Like, it's just a really, really well done system. You also don't need to thankfully worry about gearing them. I know you used to in the past, but it's no longer that way. And all you need to worry about with them is just maybe giving them some fashion updates if you want to. But you can also set all the companions' roles, whether you want them to tank, heal, or DPS. It's just a really well done system, and I do enjoy it a lot. The next thing that I have as a positive is the player and ragdoll physics. I have to say, for a game that's as old as Star Wars is, I'm really impressed with the player like physics, and like I said, the ragdoll physics. Like when someone gets thrown across a area or something in the game just moves, it moves the way you would expect it to, and it just moves really well. I mean, of course, obviously it's not perfect in every situation, but overall, I'm impressed with the physics, and especially for an engine that's this old, I'm even more impressed by it. The next thing that I want to talk about is got a wide variety of class playstyles. So like I said earlier, each faction has 4 classes, and each class has 2 subclasses. So therefore, because my math earlier was terrible because I'm still actively drinking coffee as I make this video, there's actually 16 total advanced classes. Granted, they do mirror each other, you know, like I said earlier, the Inquisitor and the Counselor will mirror each other as an example, but there are differences between the two. It's not like they're exactly the same. So, and then on top of that, all those advanced classes have 3 specs. There's a lot of different class play styles. You can also then further customize the class with certain talent choices. I'll show that on the screen here. As you can see on the right, there's 3 different categories of like talents that you can choose from, and you can choose 3 from that category. It just gives you more customization for your class. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the user interface customization. This game's got the same type of customization that, say, like an Eastern MMO would have, which I'm really happy to see. You know, it's nice that you can move anything on your UI around, customize it completely to your own liking, and I think that aspect of it's really good. The one thing I wish you were able to do, maybe I just don't know how, is make the like the enemy nameplates a little bit bigger when you're fighting. I wish you could scale that up a little bit. But that's just kind of like a small preference that I have. But overall, I'd say the UI customization in this game is absolutely fantastic. The next thing that I want to talk about is I think story questing with friends is actually done really well. I noticed that when I was questing with one of my mods and a couple viewers from my stream in game, I noticed that whenever I would go into a cutscene and they were in my group, they would actually be standing in the background with my companion, which I know that's like a really small thing, but to me it adds like a certain level of like continuity to the questing process where, you know, we're traveling and we're playing together as a group. So if they're helping me on my Inquisitor mission and I go to talk to Lord Zash about something, they'll be in the background chilling with Kem Vol, just being like, hey, we're gonna stand here while you talk to her. And I don't know, it's a little thing, but it's just something that I think is cool, and it's a nice little touch that I'm sure goes on. It's a bit underappreciated, but I think it's cool. Like I said, it adds that little bit of continuity that you're questing as a group. The next thing that I like is that the zones do scale. I think that's cool that if you go back to old content, the zones do scale with you, so that you're not just, you know, completely blasting them. I mean, granted, you will do a lot of damage because you will have the high level gear, but I do like that you can scale down to the zone, so that say you want to play with a friend who's a lower level, you will scale down to their level and you guys can play together. Another thing that I like is that the story mode dungeons, if you have to do a dungeon as part of your story campaign, it's not like you have to find people in order to continue. You could do the dungeon on an easier difficulty known as story mode, where again, it's focused on the story of the dungeon, and you also can use your companion, but you also do get a battle droid while you're playing. So you have like a little group of 3 if it's just you, and you get to go through the dungeon. And one of the things that I like though is that it's not like these story mode dungeons are just totally pushover. You have to do mechanics. If you don't do the mechanics, you will die. There was one boss in one of my earlier dungeons that I like didn't know the mechanics to the boss, and I actually wiped on it 3 times until I was able to figure out the mechanics. And even then, it took me some time to actually get through the fight. So I like that it does actually give you a bit of a challenge. I don't like when my leveling process is just walk over easy. And so I do like that there was a bit of a challenge there. Even at certain points in my leveling process, there were times where, you know, my class has stealth, for example, and I tried to brute force my way through an area, but I was taking too much damage. So I actually had to use that stealth to get through because those mobs in that area were giving me trouble. So I do appreciate that a lot. The next thing that I want to talk about is 2 new things with the specific expansion that's coming out at the end of the year. which is called Legacy of the Sith. And the first one is combat styles. So basically what this is going to be doing is you're going to be giving classes more weapon and force combinations. So for example, let's say one of your classes was limited to using a certain type of blaster or gun at one point. You will be able to use a more wide variety now, such as snipers, dual wield blasters, etc. Force users can use different certain different abilities based off of whether or not they have a light side or dark side leaning. I just like to see that there's more character customization coming to the game. Always a great thing to see. And the next thing that I'm very, very happy to see, and is something that I wish every game had, is loadouts. So you will be able to save gear, cosmetics, abilities, talent choices, all of this stuff into a loadout so that you could switch between different builds on the fly with just the click of a button. And I really appreciate that. I feel like more games do need that. And so it is really cool to see. Now, when I'm going to be moving into my next part, it's going to be what I'm calling like the gray area things. And they're things that are not good, are not bad, but they're just like, they're okay. And might be things that I like and maybe other people dislike, but I just calling it like a gray area topic, with the first one being the payment model. So I personally like the payment model of SWTOR overall, albeit I will say, saying that the game is free to play, it's like free to play asterisk, you know, like it's technically free to play, but to be honest with you guys, the free to play is basically just like a glorified free trial. You are really limited when you play as a free to play player. You have a lot of restrictions put on your account in a variety of ways. If you want to learn more, you can feel free to go research that, but there's a lot of restrictions put on your account, from limiting your professions to like not being able to do certain things from your UI and having to go to certain places. You don't get people that are subbed get priority in queues over you. Like, you just have, there's a lot of restrictions on your account. But what I do like is that if you do subscribe to the game, if you subscribe for even just 1 month, let's just say you subscribe for a month, you get access to 100% of all of the released content. And then when your sub runs out, it's not like other games where, okay, you get the content while you're subbed, but if you don't sub anymore, that content's gone. You keep all of the content that you got while you were subbed, which I think is fantastic. So for simply $15, you can get 100% of the content that the game offers, as well as get access to all of the actual, you get access, all the restrictions lifted off of your account. But what's really cool is that when your sub eventually lifts, let's say you don't want to sub anymore, or you just only want to sub for a month to get all of that content, you don't go back down to free to play status. From the subscriber status, you go down to what's called preferred status, which is basically like a middle ground between free to play and subscriber, where you have some restrictions on your account, but it's not nearly as limiting as the free to play restrictions. So personally, what I recommend for everybody who's trying this game is buy like 1 month of sub. It's only $15. It's pretty cheap. Just get the month of sub, get all the content, and then what that'll do is that will release all of the free-to-play restrictions off your account for that month, and then afterwards you go down to preferred if you decide, you know, maybe you don't want to sub long-term, or maybe you can't afford it or whatever, and your gameplay experience will be much more enjoyable having the preferred status over the free-to-play status. But again, some people don't like that model. I personally think it's pretty cool, so that's why I wanted to talk about it in the gray area here. The next thing is tab targeting. Personally, I don't mind tab targeting MMOs. You know, I enjoy MMOs for, you know, for their different combat styles. I like BDO, I like ESO, I like WoW and SWTOR. I don't really mind tab targeting personally. I do enjoy it, but I get that some people might not, so it's something that I put here in the gray area. But tab targeting in this game feels extremely similar to WoW, so if you've played WoW, it feels almost the same. And then the final thing that I want to mention is the graphics. I know a lot of people do think the graphics in the game look a bit dated. Personally, it doesn't bother me that much because I feel like SWTOR made a more stylistic choice. Once again, very similar to a game like World of Warcraft. If they went for a more like hyper-realistic style, you know, with the game coming back out in 2011, I could definitely see people being like, oh, you know, it looks really old. But I feel like they went more for like a stylistic graphic choice, so therefore the level of the graphics isn't as important. But with that being said, I will absolutely agree that some of the older areas in the game do look a bit dated. They absolutely do look a bit older. And the newer areas in the game, so I've been told that people look a lot better. The resolutions are much higher. The textures look a lot better. And I actually have to remake this video because originally I said that I thought Star Wars: The Old Republic would greatly benefit from revamping these old areas and actually improving their textures because they do look a bit dated, but they actually do plan to do that over 2022 for celebration of the 10-year anniversary. They said that they will be making UI and character creation visual improvements as well as other visual improvements over 2022. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we can expect some early game graphical updates over the next year, which I think would be absolutely fantastic for this game if you brought those higher resolution textures from the expansions back to the early leveling process. It'll make the game also feel like have better continuity in terms of its graphics, and I think everything will just look better and newer, which is always a very good thing. WoW did that a couple years ago where they updated all of the graphics in the game, and it was a really, really good thing that a lot of people liked, and so I think Star Wars could greatly benefit from that as well. But now, guys, we are going to move into some of the bad things I have as my first impressions from the game. Not everything is always sunshine and rainbows. There, of course, are some negatives. None of my negatives at the moment particularly have to do with anything gameplay-wise. A lot of it has to do with some performance things. So the first thing that I have is that when you first power up the game, your mouse moves way too fast, and there's no way to adjust it in the in-game settings. You can turn down your camera rotation to 0% all you want. It doesn't do anything. You actually have to delve deep into your a hard drive and go into your account settings deep within your app data folder in Star Wars Republic, and you have to add in a line in a text file that actually slows down your mouse. And I get it, it's not a big deal. It's something you only have to do once, but it's 2021. We should be able to update that setting actually inside the game. People shouldn't have to do research and figure out how to go into their TXT settings to find out how to change their mouse settings, So that is something I think needs to be changed. Another thing that I have is that there's micro stutters during your gameplay, something I do hope gets improved with their technological updates that they do have coming over 2022. But yeah, there are micro stutters during gameplay. It's not frequent enough to the point that it deters me from playing the game, but it happens enough that I needed to mention it here. So sometimes when you're going and doing combat, when you first engage enemies, you'll notice that your computer has a little bit of a micro stutter. Certain times, maybe if an enemy dies, it'll stutter a little bit. They happen every so often, and they can be a little annoying, but it's not the end of the world. But again, I wanted to mention here, it is something that's just part of the engine. It's just a known issue with the game. I've seen people list ways that they've supposedly solved it. I've tried a bunch of them. None of it's worked for me, but there are micro stutters during your gameplay at certain points in combat. There's another thing that I have here. I don't really know what to call it, but I call it the random camera bug. So sometimes when you're playing and you're, obviously, clicking right click to turn your character and you release it to walk straight or whatever. Sometimes when you re-hit right click to turn your character again, your camera will just snap to a random direction, extreme left, extreme right, up or down. And it happens again, very similar to my last point. It happens enough that it is a kind of annoying and that I needed to mention it here, but not so much that once again, it deters me from playing. So just again, keep in mind that is something that happens. So if that does happen to you, no, you're not losing it. It is just a known issue with the game. The next thing that I have is bad lag in the main city. Oh my God, does the fleet lag to all hell. There are certain parts literally when I'm traveling in the fleet, which is essentially your capital city, so to speak, for your faction. There are certain points that I avoid because I know there's going to be a lot of people standing there and I don't want to lag. It does get a little bit better the longer you are in the fleet and the longer that those players are around you. But when they first load in, the game comes to a crawl. So I am hoping that we do see some lag improvements for the main city because it is definitely not the best. The next thing that I have listed and is something that I hope gets changed, and when I've done some research on this, it seems a lot of people feel similarly, and I can completely understand why, is that there's no cross-roam queues for flashpoints and for PvP, which I find a little bit strange. There's only 2 US servers, and I believe there's 3 EU servers, and I'm surprised there's no cross-realm queue between, let's say, the NA servers have cross-realm queue and the EU servers have cross-realm queue. I don't really understand why. I feel like that would be a massive benefit for the game in terms of PvP and Flashpoint population and lowering queue times if you were able to do cross-realm queuing. It's something that I hope does get changed because they did say on their latest dev stream when they were talking about the new expansion and talking about the 2022 improvements that they were going to be adding what they called technical modernization to the game. And I don't know if that means we're going to be getting cross-realm queue, but one would hope that it does, because that is, again, a very modern thing, and WoW has that now, and it is something that I think this game could greatly benefit from, and it would make the population feel a lot healthier if you were able to queue across multiple servers and weren't just limited to the people on your server. The next thing that I have is that the GCD does feel a little bit slow. I heard this will speed up as you get more Alacrity, which is the Star Wars: The Old Republic version of Haste, which increases, it decreases your global cooldown and increases your speed at which you can do attacks. So I know that will change, but it definitely does feel a little bit slow at first. And then my final bad point is that it's got a bit of a slower content release schedule. The last expansion was in 2019. Prior to that was 2016. You know, the game is obviously still being maintained and developed by BioWare, as can be seen with the upcoming expansion at the end of 2021 and all of the stuff that I mentioned that's going to be released over 2022. But content in the game definitely doesn't have the history of being as released as often as other MMOs. Thankfully, there's already a ton of content in the game, and with each base class having their own, unique class story, there's a boatload of content to tackle as a new player before you even need to worry about having a drought, especially when you combine that with everything that's coming at the end of this year with the new expansion and all the new content that's coming next year. But guys, even with some of these negatives being said, I've been enjoying Star Wars: The Old Republic a lot more than I actually expected to, actually. I think the game's really solid, and you honestly do not need to know anything about the Star Wars universe to play the game. In fact, prior to playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, I had basically next to no Star Wars knowledge, except for what a regular person knows from just, life or whatever. And after playing the game, I actually finally started to watch the movies, and it was really cool to see the planets and people I had interacted with in game in the movies. But like I said, so far, my first impressions of the game are very good. I definitely think it's a bit of an underrated MMO at the moment. I've been enjoying it a lot. Maybe my opinions will change a bit more and alter a bit as I get more towards endgame, especially since I have heard extremely mixed reactions about the gearing process in the game. I have learned about that a little bit more. I can definitely see why the reactions to it are a bit mixed, but I'm not going to dive into that into this video, as this is just a first impressions video, and I instead will hit on the gearing and stuff like that when I go through my full is it worth playing video. But so far, the leveling experience has been a fantastic time, and I have been enjoying the game. And speaking of which, I do play on SWTOR, so if anybody is a new player in Star Wars: The Old Republic and is looking for a guild, feel free to join my Discord server, link in the description below, and I can give you an invite to our guild. We just created a guild by popular demand on stream on that server, so if you would like to join, feel free to let me know below. But guys, that is going to be it for me today. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you are new to Star Wars: The Old Republic, what do you think about the game? What are your first impressions about the game? Let me know down in those comments. And guys, if you did enjoy this video, I would appreciate it if you left a like on it. And for more SWTOR content, as well as other MMORPG content, I'd appreciate if you hit that sub button, as well as hit the bell to keep those notifications on. But thank you so much for coming today. I do very much appreciate it. As always, I'm Dottz Gaming, and I'll see you all in the next video.